When we look at co-located culture, values are what drive the collective behaviours. And many companies have built their culture in office and then looked to maintain that culture. How do you think your organisation values have stood up, and which have been stressed most, do you think, over the course of the pandemic?
Yeah, so I think for us, when we look at so again, like we have a different perspective than I'm sure many of you folks out there watching. Our values came from when we were remote. So one thing that for anybody now, because even as offices go back, and I think most places will still be hybrid. Like I would be very surprised. Maybe there are people on that can educate me, but I'd be surprised that if some places are going to be fully back, like everybody here 5 days a week, because I think it worked. I think largely, depending on your organization and what you do, it can work and being hybrid. So I think even being hybrid, I would suggest to other people to relook at your values and do they still work in a hybrid world? Because for us, the values that we hold up, we have 5, and the 2 most important ones that I think were create, and they were pre my time. So these values were created when we were like about a dozen people. We didn't even have any HR people. So they were genuinely from our founder and the first few people who worked for the company. But the 2 for us that kind of bind us together are prioritize impact and lead with empathy. So ours, people here will know they're kind of more action words rather than just plain words. So prioritize impact is the one genuinely that I remind myself of every day. I don't need to remind myself. It's the one that's top of mind for me. Because when you're remote, as everybody here knows during COVID, even when we all started working from home, I can drift. Maybe I won't talk about other people. I'll talk about me. I can certainly, there's so much to do. And especially with this company, I like this is a startup. There's a million things to do, like build this team. The list is just too long. So what we try to ground every single employee in is prioritize impact. So when you're sat at your desk and there's a million emails or messages and 50 things to do, focus on what are the most impactful, not about the busy work, but what's going to make a difference. For the whole company is a bit large, but even you, like what is going to give you satisfaction that you get done today of all the things that you need to do, and of that, what's helping the company. And that helps to distill down focus and helps people to be able to prioritize. And then the other piece for us is empathy. So like it's a common value, but for us, leading with empathy, we're in 45, I think actually today 47 countries with only 900 people. So 900, depending on the size of company you're coming from, is big or small. But when that number of people are spread across 47 different countries the way we are, there's no choice. And actually, maybe that's not even a good example, because if you're not physically located in the same space as somebody, it's hard to read them. It's hard to know if there's something going on. It's hard to know what they walked out the door with, because there is no door. You're presenting yourself and you don't have that, oftentimes that same connection. So, you go into, whether it's async communications with people or going into meetings, always going in with empathy, because you don't know what that person's going through. So we've got 3 others. No ego is actually another one. Maybe I'm too old to love it. It's a hashtag no ego. That's the value. But that one is that one's about being open to feedback. So it's that one for me is less of about remote, but more of we're moving so fast as a new startup and bringing our products to market and trying to be this huge success. We have no time. And actually, I can just touch on it now. One of the things that we've taken away in terms of, not taken away, but never implemented, was like formal performance reviews. And that leads from that no ego value, because we believe we have to have regular feedback. If we waited for formal performance reviews in any period, even if they were monthly, don't mind quarterly or yearly, it's too late. So we have that value foremost for us of no ego, being we need to be open to feedback. We have to accept that someone else could have a better view. Even if you're the expert in what you do, be open, listen to feedback. So there's some of the values that I do think help ground us, particularly being remote, and that the latter one more so because we're moving very quickly.
You've touched on so many interesting and fascinating topics right there, Sarah. So it sounds to me like with the freedom of autonomy that's given to people comes a responsibility to have impact. And even the fact of having like feedback is a gift, like it is a gift. And I think of 2 things. I think when we give feedback, it's important that we have the relationships and the trust to deal with the tension that comes with that feedback. And as long as the intent, there's kind of positivity in the intent around the feedback, how have you built these levels of trust and relationship in a remote setting, Sarah?
Yeah, it's so we start with, so some of the things that we've done with trying to do that from day one. So we have a pretty, well, I'd say unique, maybe it's more common. So obviously our onboarding. So we hire, with the numbers that we hire, about somewhere between 30 and 50 people every 2 weeks. So we have a set, only hire every 2 weeks. We've set dates just so we can be organized. But on that onboarding week is a full immersive week. So we use our own product. So we run it as an event. So actually, when I came into this, I had to unlearn a lot of what I had traditionally thought about onboarding and performance and all of those things. Like, I really had to be open to different ways of doing this. And so we run a week-long event. Basically, it's hosted on Hopin. And part of that, so we would have like, so part of what our product offers is like, there's networking areas, there's expo booths. We will post all of the content. So for example, videos about our values, videos about some of our training resources that we're running. So like to this one in particular, yeah, it's not something that comes naturally and easily to people, especially giving and receiving feedback. So we actually have like a No Ego 101 as a course that we run regularly internally, which is like the art of feedback, which just gives people tools and techniques. We talk about it often so that people know when they're receiving it. It's not personal. It's not like, you know, this is like targeted just at you and you're the only one who's getting some constructive criticism. It is done across the board. So we talk about our values, and that is one in particular. We do a quick overview during our onboarding and what we call our Hopin Academy in that first week. Then throughout, like so we run a weekly all hands. So again, that's something I think for people to think about when you go hybrid. So all hands being a call where we bring the entire company together. I came from a culture where we did that monthly. I thought that was fine because the way I saw it was information giving. It was simply like something you turned on or you showed up at to just hear about the company. Whereas when we're so distributed, it needs to be interactive because people, I'm by myself right here. Like, I still to this day have not met one person of the 900. I, like, to your question earlier, I genuinely feel more connected to this team, but it's because we make an effort. And so that our all hands is one example. So we do it every week. We do it on a Friday, but it's a show. Like I like, it sounds like it takes much more effort. It doesn't take any more effort than running a regular, like planning an all company meeting. But we play music at the top of it. We have our chat turned on throughout the whole event, or throughout the whole show, as we call it. We have hosts hosting it. During that meet, so that's one of our core connected events. So that is where our team, everybody, like I was even on like holiday, and it came to like the Friday where we do this on a Friday, and I was out with my kids somewhere, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to turn this on my phone, and my kids are like, is that your company all hands again? they sit in and they watch it with me,
like Netflix.
Good music, good speakers,
yeah.
Like, and we're super transparent at that. So we talk about, like, you know, financial performance. We keep everybody focused. Like, what are the top things that as a company we're focused on this week? Like, we have, you know, longer range plans, but what is important this week? And our CEO opens it. It is one of the most energizing events I've ever been to, and it happens every single week. But even on that, going back to the point of feedback, like our CEO role models it. Like, we genuinely talk about, he talks about learning, continually learning, him as a CEO and him talking to other founders, CEOs, and other, like, even his team and what he learns. And so I think we also, it's very much alive that we continually bring it up and talk about it, so that when it becomes real, and, you know, whether it's a colleague or a manager or somebody on a different team giving you feedback, it's something that isn't, you don't feel as targeted.
Nice.
And it's hopefully more open. You're more open to hearing it.
So tell me, I've heard and read about this vibe team. What is a vibe team and what do they do?
So that's a self-labeled team. So again, it's a wonderful team, but it sounds like almost bigger and jazzier than it is. So our vibe team sits within my broader people team. So I lead the people function here. And we had one person in an internal comms, so running our all hands, like managing internal communications. And we did have one person on my team on internal events. That's maybe a bit unique for other companies, but because we're an events company, we wanted to make sure we use our product internally to the best and we can showcase it. So we had one person in internal events, and actually we had another person who was what we call head of remote. So that person's job is to look at everything we do through a remote lens, like is like all of our practices, not just in the people space, but how we manage expenses, how we do like everything that touches an employee and their experience of being able to thrive in a remote environment. That person looks through the lens. So they self-branded themselves. So it's kind of they came together as a team. There's now 2 each on each though. So it's a team of kind of 5 to 6 people. They call themselves the Vibe Team because they genuinely exist to help our company come together. They exist to kind of help ensure collaboration, communication, to curate our culture. Yeah, it's a fun team.
I heard a phrase, a culture carrier, and somebody obviously to advocate and to lead from the front around sharing behaviors. But you mentioned vibe, and again, I know we're going to be joined by Claude Silver and Gary Vaynerchuk. He talks a lot about vibe, in fact, and a lot about the individual experience, and that culture isn't an action, it isn't necessarily one behavior, it's how we experience others in an environment or indeed virtually. So vibe is actually a really interesting word to capture that. Could you tell me a little bit about maybe some of the work practices that you think are unique at Hopin to connect your workforce to a distributed workplace, Sarah?
Yeah, I think some of them, like for example, I think the workforce to workplace are things like our values. Like there's probably not, in terms of things we haven't spoken about. So our values, I feel genuine. I know it's not necessarily a work practice, but it's something that we talk about regularly. It's not just words on a page. It is something that we bring to life in most of in like any kind of company-wide event or interaction. We genuinely talk about it. I think what we do for feedback, having no formal performance reviews. Our feedback is anytime. So we talk about feedback, but yes, we also want the formality of having it recorded at times, but it's never, I will never say never. I'm always here to learn, but I don't think we would ever go back to having like a set period where a manager has to meet their employee and give them feedback. It should just be always in every one-to-one, or just in the moment whenever it's needed. Otherwise you'll slow down. And flexibility, I think, probably less of a work practice. I guess it is probably a work practice, but ensuring every manager that comes on board to Hopin needs to be comfortable with this. Like we don't, and Johnny, our founder CEO, he doesn't care. Like it's a different way if you're online at 9 o'clock or if you come online at midday. Like and that has to be, and some managers need to get comfortable with that and some won't, and we're probably not going to be the place for that person. But being flexible and having that at our core of also being agile, because you can't work here if you can't quickly turn to something else or have your priorities shifted pretty quickly. So that we give, not that we give, but I think it's just how we work is flexible. Like now, like for me, my kids come in from school, I will stop for like a half hour then and just see them, which I've never had before, like 3 p.m. I definitely work later because I work a lot with the US, but we can just manage our days to suit. And so long as we communicate, so long as each person talks to their manager and communicates, hey, this is how I'm going to work and this is what is how I'll be most productive.
Yeah,
we're supportive of it.
It's funny you mentioned kids. My youngest started school last week, Sarah. Nice. Lily, and she came home for the first day and she said Luke, not his real name, was being mean. And I said, if anyone touches my girls, I'll give them this, in jest, right? Yeah. She came back to me yesterday. She goes, oh, Dad, I told Luke what you're going to do to him. I was like, oh no. And Luke's dad said that he's going to put you in jail, that he's a police officer. So people describing the first, I know, some pointing out here in the office. But people say it's kind of like the first day of school. And my final question to you really is that first day of school moment, Sarah, when you meet your colleagues and when you convene for the first time, what is it you hope to get that you don't currently have to get a full sense of co-located culture?
Yeah, and so yeah, just to be clear, I can't wait to meet people. I can't wait to go and like have a drink with people and and get in the room and work together. So we will always be remote first. We will definitely like listen to our team. We survey regularly to see, like, to make sure that this is working. We hire people purposefully. Like one of the flaws that we had at the beginning was not being really clear on what we were and what this is. And we didn't want to set any expectations that, oh yeah, we're, when we build, we'll then get an office. we may or we may not. Like our business also operates hybrid. So you can have a virtual event with Hopin, but we can also help rerun an in-person event and actually have that as a hybrid. So we're certainly open to figuring out the future path, and that may be a blend. But when we physically get together, I genuinely think that's golden as well. I think it can be magical to actually meet with people. So we are doing where people are located in cities together. We've started doing what we call, again, cheesy names, but Hopin Hangouts, which are just informal. So they are like, if you're in the city and COVID, etc., is all whatever restrictions you're following, if you're able to meet up, we're doing that. And actually it's caused great buzz internally. So we've like a Slack channel for called Hoppineers in the Wild, when you actually see somebody in real life. So for us, it causes huge excitement when you do get to see. So I do think we will do like offsites. I do think we will do in-person meetups when, you know, it's tough for us. If our whole team was here, we'd have done it by now, but the team is distributed around the world, so which makes it tricky to organize something yet when COVID is still, COVID restrictions vary across different countries. But yeah, I'm excited. I think being remote and fully distributed is a great way to work, but I think it will be complemented by being able to meet up regularly.
Well, I wish you every success in the next phase of the adventure, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will take a look at that platform when we do look at it again. Appreciate it, Sarah. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the event.
Thank you.